My sister came at me with a pair of scissors in the middle of my wedding reception. I'm Natalie Brooks. I was 38, the oldest daughter in my family, and I'd spent 11 years working in hospital communications, the last 8 managing crises where one careless sentence could become tomorrow's headline. But nothing in my training prepared me for Chloe grabbing a fistful of my hair and screaming, "Why should I be bald while you get to marry a rich man?" The first cut happened so fast I only heard the blades close. Then I saw 6 inches of my hair slide down the front of my wedding dress. I grabbed her wrist. My father rushed in from behind and locked his arms around mine. "Natalie, stop. Don't make this worse." I remember thinking he had grabbed the wrong daughter. Then my mother stepped between us, looked straight at me, not at the scissors in Chloe's hand, and said, "Stop resisting. Your sister has suffered enough. Let her calm down." Chloe cut another section. And then she screamed the words that changed everything. "You promised." I froze. Not because of the hair. Because I had never promised her anything. 20 minutes later, while my wedding guests whispered outside the bridal suite, Mom was already trying to rewrite what had happened. "We'll say you two planned something symbolic," she told me. Chloe just got carried away. That was when the crisis manager in me finally showed up. I looked at my mother and said one word. "No." That night, Chloe sent me a message. "You promised Mom you'd do something with your hair so I wouldn't be the only one." I read it 3 times. She hadn't written, "You promised me." She had written, "You promised Mom." And when I opened my old wedding emails, I found the first sentence that made me wonder how many promises my mother had been making in my name for years. The reception had been beautiful for almost exactly 87 minutes. I know that because our photographer's timeline put the first dance at 6:42 p.m., and the venue manager's incident report later placed the first disturbance at 8:09. That kind of precision probably sounds strange coming from a bride. It wouldn't sound strange to anyone who worked with me. For most of my adult life, I had made a living separating what happened from what people remembered happening. Hospitals are emotional places. When something goes wrong, 5 people can walk out of the same room with 5 different versions of a conversation. My job was never to tell people what to feel. It was to figure out what could be verified before somebody's fear, anger, or assumption hardened into fact. At my own wedding, I had deliberately turned that part of my brain off. That was the irony. I had wanted one day when I didn't have to fact-check anybody I loved. Ben and I had paid for most of the wedding ourselves. Nothing extravagant. A renovated brick venue outside Chicago. 112 guests. White flowers. Warm lights strung over exposed beams. And a jazz trio during cocktails. Because Ben's late grandfather had loved old standards. Ben was 40 and worked as a civil engineer. He made a good living. So did I. We had savings, retirement accounts, and a mortgage pre-approval for a 3-bedroom house that would probably need a new roof within 5 years. In Chloe's vocabulary, that made him rich. She had started calling him Mr. Moneybags after learning he owned his condo outright. Ben had bought that condo 12 years earlier, when it had outdated cabinets, water stains around one bathroom vent, and an elevator that stopped working every 3rd Tuesday. We used to laugh about the rich man label. I wasn't laughing when Chloe screamed it across my reception. After my father released me, 2 of my closest friends, Priya and Jenna, moved between Chloe and me. I remember Priya saying, "Put the scissors down," not screaming, just saying it with the kind of voice people use around a frightened animal. Chloe stared at me. Her chest rose and fell sharply. She wore a soft champagne-colored head wrap that matched her dress. She had chosen it herself 3 weeks earlier, after rejecting 2 wigs and a silk scarf my mother had bought without asking. Her alopecia had flared badly again that spring. I knew that. I knew exactly how hard that was for her. I also knew there were several inches of my hair lying on the floor. Both things were true. That distinction would become important later. At the time, I was mostly trying to breathe. "Give me the scissors," Priya said. Chloe's hand tightened. Mom touched Chloe's elbow. "Sweetheart." Not Natalie. "Are you hurt?" Not, "What did you just do?" "Sweetheart." Chloe handed her the scissors. Then my mother looked at me. "You need to go fix your hair before everyone starts staring." That sentence landed harder than I expected. Everyone was already staring. My father stood 3 feet away with his hands half raised like he wasn't sure where to put them. I looked at him. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. At work, silence after a critical incident meant something. It usually meant somebody was deciding which version of himself he could live with. I didn't have the patience to help my father choose. I turned to Priya. Can you take me upstairs? She nodded immediately. Jenna gathered my train. Ben found us before we reached the stairwell. Someone must have told him something, because he came around the corner moving fast, his face pale beneath the color the photographer had somehow coaxed into it all afternoon. His eyes went to my hair, then to me. What happened? Chloe cut it. He looked past me toward the ballroom. His jaw tightened. For 1 second, I saw exactly what he wanted to do. Then he looked back at me. Who do you want in the room with you? That question saved the next hour. Not because Ben saved me. Because he gave the decision back. Nobody from my family. Okay, that was all. He walked beside us upstairs. When we reached the bridal suite, Priya closed the door, and Jenna helped me out of the veil. I sat in front of the mirror. The damage looked worse under bright vanity bulbs. The left side of my hair still brushed below my shoulder. The right side had been hacked somewhere near my jaw in 2 uneven chunks. For a moment I stared at my reflection and thought about nothing. Then I thought, absurdly, the photographer still needs sunset portraits. That was how my brain worked under stress. Task first, feeling later. Our stylist, Marisol, came upstairs carrying her kit. She took one look at me and went very still. Do you want me to try to even this out? The question made my throat tighten. Not, I can fix it. Not, you need to cut it. Do you want me to? Yes, I said, but only as much as you have to. She nodded. While she worked, Ben stayed outside the door. I knew because I heard my mother arrive. Ben, I need to see my daughter. Natalie asked for space. I'm her mother. I know. This is a family situation. I know. There was a pause. Then Mom lowered her voice, which somehow made it easier to hear. Chloe is devastated, Ben said. Natalie hasn't said she wants to see anyone yet. I closed my eyes. In 11 years of hospital communications, I had sat through more hostile meetings than I could count. Surgeons blaming administrators, families blaming nurses, executives asking if one carefully chosen adjective could make a bad outcome look less bad. I knew what pressure sounded like. I also knew what it sounded like when somebody refused to pick up pressure that wasn't theirs. Ben wasn't fighting my mother. He wasn't negotiating. He was repeating my instruction. That was all. It was more respect than I had received downstairs. 25 minutes later, I told him Mom could come in. He opened the door. Diane Brooks entered, carrying herself the way she always did when she wanted a room to believe she was the calmest person in it. My mother was 64, polished without looking flashy, with silver blonde hair cut to her shoulders, and the kind of soft, composed voice people trusted almost automatically. She had spent most of her career in nonprofit administration. She could make an accusation sound like concern. Natalie, she said softly. I waited. She looked at my hair. Her mouth trembled. For half a second, I thought she might finally say she was sorry. Instead, she closed the door behind her. We need to decide what everyone is going to hear. There it was. The first statement. I turned toward her in the chair. About what? She blinked. You know what? I want you to say it. Her expression changed slightly. Not anger. Concern. Diane almost always reached concern before anger. What happened downstairs? Chloe cut my hair. She had an episode. She cut my hair. Natalie, please. I am not denying what happened. That phrase sounded familiar. Not because she had said it before. Because I had heard versions of it in conference rooms. We are not denying the outcome. Usually followed by an attempt to redefine causation. Mom lowered her voice. There are over 100 people downstairs. Some of them saw part of what happened. If everyone starts telling their own version, Chloe is going to be humiliated. I looked at her. I'm the one with half my hair on the floor. And you are understandably upset. Understandably upset. A phrase designed to recognize emotion without conceding anything else. What do you want me to say? Relief crossed her face too quickly. I think we keep it simple. You girls planned something symbolic because Chloe's been struggling with her hair and she got carried away. I actually thought I had misheard her. You want me to tell people I agreed to that? Not exactly. That is exactly what you just said. I said you planned something symbolic. I didn't. You wanted her to feel included. That is not the same thing. Natalie. She exhaled slowly. Does every word have to become a deposition? There it was again. The irritation, with precision. I looked at my own reflection. One side of my hair was still wet where Marisol had sprayed it. No. Mom paused. No what? No. I'm not saying that. Her posture stiffened. If you tell people Chloe attacked you, she did. She is already ashamed. That doesn't change what happened. You don't know what this could do to her. I turned completely in the chair. What do you think it did to me? Mom looked at me for 3 long seconds. Then she said, "You're stronger than she is." And there it was. The oldest contract in our family. Not written. Never signed. Still enforceable. I looked away. Please leave. Natalie? I said no to the statement. And I need you to leave. Mom's face changed. Not much. Just enough that I could see the injury she felt at being told no. You're in shock. Probably. You don't want to make decisions like this right now. Then I won't make any more. I want you to leave. Ben opened the door when I called his name. Mom stared at me for another second. Then she left. She did not slam the door. Diane never slammed doors. She preferred to close them quietly enough that you had time to wonder whether you had been unreasonable. A few minutes later, the venue manager came upstairs. Her name was Elise. She looked uncomfortable but professional. I wanted to check on you, and also ask what you'd like us to do. What are my options? We documented the incident. 2 staff members witnessed part of it. There is security coverage in the ballroom, though I need to confirm the angle. If you want us to contact security or law enforcement, we can. I looked at the clock. 8,570 m. Less than an hour earlier, I had been dancing with my husband. Now someone was asking whether I wanted police at my wedding. For one sharp second, I imagined the entire thing accelerating. Statements. Questions. Guests filming. People online turning Chloe into a monster, or me into a public relations professional who couldn't manage her own family. But that wasn't the real reason I hesitated. The real reason was simpler. I didn't know what I wanted yet. And I refused to let shock make another decision about my body, my family, or my future. Please preserve the incident report, I said. And the footage if your policy allows you to retain it. Elise nodded. I can flag it. I want the names of the staff members who witnessed it. Of course. And Chloe isn't to come into this room. Understood. She hesitated. Do you want us to call the police? Not tonight. I heard myself say it and immediately knew how some people would judge that choice. Maybe they would be right for themselves. But I spent my working life telling people not to make permanent decisions at the highest point of a crisis unless safety required it. I gave myself the same courtesy. Not calling that night did not mean I had forgiven Chloe. It did not mean the incident was small. It meant I was taking back the right to choose my next move. Later, after the last guests had gone, and Ben and I were in the hotel suite we were supposed to remember for entirely different reasons, my phone lit up. Chloe. For a moment I didn't open it, then I did. Don't pretend you don't know. You promised Mom you'd do something with your hair so I wouldn't be the only one. You changed your mind because you were embarrassed of me. I read the message once, then again, then a third time. Ben was loosening his tie near the window. You okay? I don't know. He started toward me. I lifted a finger. Give me a second. He stopped. I zoomed in on the sentence even though I didn't need to. You promised Mom. Not me. Mom. I took a screenshot. It was instinct. At work, if wording mattered, you preserved the wording before somebody deleted, edited, or reinterpreted it. Ben sat across from me. What? She thinks I promised something. Did you? No. Anything close? I started to answer immediately. Then stopped. Anything close? I had told Mom dozens of things during wedding planning. I wanted Chloe included. I wanted her comfortable. I didn't care if she wore a wig, scarf, head wrap, or nothing at all. I had agreed not to make hairstyling a big group production because Chloe hated that, but promised to cut my own hair? No. Still, something had gotten from me to Chloe, and it had arrived, wearing the shape of consent. I opened my laptop. Ben looked at me. You're working? No. It was the first lie I told that night. I was absolutely working, just not for the hospital. I opened the folder I had used for wedding planning. For months, I had deliberately resisted treating my family like one of my crisis teams. That mattered. I wasn't careless. I had made a conscious choice to trust them. I had told myself, this is my wedding. I shouldn't have to verify my own mother. Now one word had changed the threshold. Promised. I typed it into the search bar. Nothing useful. Then, hair. A few messages with Marisol. Then, Chloe. Too many. Then, special. 4 results. The third email was from Mom, sent 6 weeks before the wedding. The subject line was simply, Chloe. I opened it. Her message began normally. Thank you for making sure she doesn't feel like an afterthought. I know wedding planning is stressful. Then, I told her you had agreed to do something special so she wouldn't feel singled out. I sat up straighter. Ben saw my face. What is it? I never agreed to something special. Are you sure? Yes. And I was. Because I remembered the conversation. Mom had called while I was driving home from work. She said Chloe felt awkward about the bridal getting ready photos. I said, I want her to feel included. Whatever makes her comfortable is fine with me. That was it. I want her included. Mom's email had turned it into, Natalie agreed to do something special. Intention had become commitment. I scrolled. At the bottom, Mom had written, Don't worry. Natalie always understands what family requires. Something cold moved down my spine. Not because the sentence proved anything. It didn't. But I knew that sentence. Not those exact words. The idea. Natalie understands. Natalie can handle it. Natalie is reasonable. Natalie is strong. Natalie will get over it. I closed the laptop, then opened my phone. I wrote to Mom. For clarity, I never agreed to have my hair cut or altered for Chloe. I will not tell anyone that I did. I read it twice. Sent it. My phone rang in less than 30 seconds. Mom. Ben looked at the screen. You want me to? No. I answered. Hi, Natalie. Why are you putting things like that in writing? Not. What are you talking about? Not. Of course you never agreed. Why are you putting things like that in writing? Because it's true. We're family. We don't need records. Something in me went very still. Hospitals needed records because memory changed under stress. Organizations needed records because power changed language. People needed records because good intentions were not a substitute for accuracy. But in my family, documentation had always sounded rude, too formal, too cold, too much like I didn't trust them. I'm going to sleep, I said. We need to deal with Chloe. No. She's been crying for hours. I'm sure she has. She thinks she ruined your wedding. She cut my hair during it. Natalie, listen to yourself. I am. Silence. Then Mom softened her voice. Sweetheart, somebody has to be the bigger person. I closed my eyes. There it was. The phrase that had followed me most of my life. The bigger person. It sounded noble. Until I started remembering who was always asked to be bigger. When Chloe's hair first started falling out, I was 25. She was 18. At first, nobody knew what was happening. She found hair in the shower. Then on her pillow. Then a thin patch near her temple became a larger one. The dermatologist eventually diagnosed alopecia areata. Mom handled the medical side with real care. That part matters. She called insurance. Found specialists. Drove Chloe to appointments. Researched wigs. Sat with her when she cried. Shielded her from one aunt who said something unforgivably stupid about just needing better vitamins. Diane loved my sister. She still does. The problem wasn't that Mom didn't care. The problem was what caring became. At first, I helped because Chloe was my little sister. I drove her to one appointment when Mom couldn't leave work. I sat with her while she tried on wigs and hated all of them. I canceled a weekend in Wisconsin because Chloe had a bad flare and didn't want to be alone. None of those choices bothered me. Then Mom started framing every decision around Chloe's suffering. My 26th birthday dinner was supposed to be at a crowded tapas restaurant downtown. 2 days before, Chloe said she couldn't handle a busy room. Mom called. Would you mind changing it? I did. We went to a quiet Italian place near my parents' house. Mom hugged me afterward. That's why I can always count on you. It felt good. That was the dangerous part. A year later, I earned a partial scholarship for a graduate certificate in communication strategy. At dinner, Mom leaned over before dessert. Chloe had a rejection this morning. Maybe don't make tonight all about achievement. It was my celebration. I spent most of dinner asking Chloe about a show she liked. Another year, before a family portrait, Mom looked at the cobalt blue dress I had brought. Could you wear the beige one? Why? You know Chloe already feels like people notice you first. I changed. No one called these things sacrifices. They were evidence that I was considerate, mature, strong, the bigger person. At 27, I was working in public relations and internal communications for a hospital system in Chicago. I had been there 3 years. A larger hospital network in Denver invited me to interview for a senior communications role. It wasn't a dream job, but it was a step. More responsibility, better salary, a chance to build something outside the orbit I had always known. That week, Chloe had another difficult flare. She had stopped attending social events and barely answered messages. Mom said, "She needs stability right now." She did not tell me not to go. That's important. Our family rarely issued commands. Commands were easier to resist. Mom just made the alternative sound morally revealing. I remember asking, what would my leaving have to do with Chloe? Mom sighed. She's already losing so much, Natalie. I withdrew from the interview. For years afterward, I called it bad timing. 3 years later, at 30, I moved into crisis communications inside my own hospital system. That was where my real professional identity formed. I learned to distrust phrases like, everyone thinks, people are saying, we all know. In a crisis, those phrases were gasoline. You asked, who? What exactly did they say? When? To whom? What changed between the original statement and the version now moving through the building? I became very good at it. And yet, at home, I never asked the same questions. Mom says Chloe is hurt. Mom says Dad is disappointed. Mom says Evan doesn't want to get involved. Mom says everyone thinks you're being too hard on her. I accepted my mother as a reliable source because she was my mother. The morning after the wedding, I woke with a headache and an unfamiliar weight against my neck where my hair used to fall. For 3 seconds, I forgot. Then I remembered everything at once. Ben was already awake. He had ordered coffee. Neither of us mentioned the wedding for almost 10 minutes. That may have been the kindest thing anyone did for me that weekend. Eventually, my phone buzzed. Evan. I almost ignored it. Then answered. Hey. A pause. You okay? The question almost undid me. Not really. Yeah. Another pause. Evan had always been the quiet one. 7 years younger than me. 4 younger than Chloe. Growing up, he learned that the safest family position was often somewhere near the edge of the room. I don't know what to say, he admitted. You don't have to say anything. Mom says you're not coming for Thanksgiving now because you can't stand being around Chloe. I frowned. Thanksgiving was nearly 4 months away. I haven't decided anything about Thanksgiving. Oh, did Mom say I told her that? Yeah, I didn't. Silence. Then Evan said, then I don't know where that came from. Neither did I. But now I had 2 data points. Chloe believed I had promised something. Evan believed I had made a Thanksgiving decision. Both had come through Mom. 1 incident could be confusion. 2 were not a system. Not yet. That afternoon, I took a notebook from my work bag. I drew 4 columns. What I said. Who heard it. What came back. What was added. I felt ridiculous. Then I remembered the hair on the ballroom floor. I started writing. A month earlier, I had told Mom, I'm tired. I probably won't stay late Sunday. 2 days later, Evan asked why I didn't want to deal with Chloe. Different wording. Same event. At another family dinner, I had told Mom, I may skip Thanksgiving this year. Ben and I haven't decided. Dad later said, your mother told me you don't want another family scene. I had never said that. Then I remembered something Chloe had thrown at me months earlier. You've thought I was unstable for years. At the time, I assumed she was speaking emotionally. I had said, I think you need support beyond what I can give. I had never used the word unstable. But my mother did. That was one of Diane's words. She had used it about a former coworker who challenged her in a board meeting. Unstable. A neighbor who got angry over a property line dispute. Unstable. A cousin whose divorce became messy. Unstable. Years earlier, Evan had joked, "Mom has 3 categories for people: nice, difficult, and unstable." At the time, we laughed. Now I circled the word in my notebook. Linguistic fingerprints weren't proof. Anyone could use the same word. But patterns often began as details too small to matter. On Monday, I went back to work. I almost didn't. Mom had texted twice that Chloe wasn't doing well, and the old reflex inside me had already started calculating how much leave I had available. Then an email reminder appeared on my screen. Leadership Development Program applications, close Friday. I had planned to apply before the wedding. 6 months. Internal workshops. Mentoring. Project leadership. Nothing glamorous. Nothing guaranteed. Exactly the sort of thing I had postponed before, because somebody in my family was always in a worse season than I was. My cursor hovered over the application. I could hear Mom in my head. Maybe wait until things settle. Things had never settled. There was always another reason. I completed the application. Attached my resume. Clicked submit. No music played. No door opened. Nobody applauded. But for the first time in days, I felt something inside me move forward instead of backward. Their crisis did not get automatic veto power over my calendar. That evening, Mom called. Chloe barely slept again. "I'm sorry. She needs her sister." I stared at the ceiling. Did Chloe ask me to call? Why does that matter? Because I'm asking. Natalie, you're her big sister. There it was again. A relationship described as a job assignment. Being her sister doesn't make me the person she hurts and then uses to recover. Mom inhaled sharply. That is an awful thing to say about someone dealing with an autoimmune condition. I didn't say anything awful about her condition. You know, stress makes everything worse. I know. So why are you doing this? Doing this. Setting a boundary had already become an action against Chloe. I'm not discussing it tonight. You're punishing her. No, I'm not calling her because you told me to. That is unbelievably cold. I almost defended myself. Almost listed every appointment I had driven Chloe to. Every weekend. Every birthday. Every plan adjusted. Then I stopped. Defending my resume as a good sister would still mean accepting Mom as the person conducting the interview. If Chloe wants to talk to me, I said. She has my number. I ended the call. For the next 2 weeks, I made myself follow one rule. Whenever somebody told me what another family member thought, I asked the actual person. Mom called one afternoon. "Your father is devastated you haven't visited." I called Dad. "Mom said you're devastated I haven't come over." He sounded confused. "Devastated?" "No. I told her I wondered when you were coming." "Are you angry with me?" "No." "Do you think I owe Chloe an apology?" A pause. "I didn't say that." "Okay." I thanked him and hung up. In my notebook. Wondered, devastated. Fact. Amplified emotion. A few days later, Mom said Evan hated what I was doing to the family. I called Evan. "I hate all of this," he said. "I didn't say you were doing it." Another added motive. The pattern was forming. But I still needed to know whether Mom was merely exaggerating emotional language or actively moving information between us in a way that changed meaning. So I used something we sometimes used professionally when we suspected a leak. A harmless canary. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that could hurt anyone. Just one detail given to one source. I called Mom. We talked about ordinary things for a few minutes. Then I said, casually, "Ben and I might push the honeymoon to January." We hadn't decided anything. It was plausible. Mom asked why. "Scheduling." "Is this because of everything with Chloe?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Yes." I changed the subject. 2 hours and 13 minutes later, Chloe texted. "So now you're changing the honeymoon because being around me ruined your wedding?" I felt the familiar stillness that came over me at work when a rumor finally revealed its root. I typed, "Who told you that?" The reply came almost immediately. "Mom. Who else?" There it was. Natalie to Diane. Diane to Chloe. But scheduling had become blame. Possibility had become consequence. And Chloe's involvement had been inserted somewhere between the source and the recipient. I didn't call Mom. Not yet. I called Chloe. She answered on the fifth ring. What? I want to ask you something. If this is about the honeymoon. It is, but not the way you think. She laughed once without humor. Of course. Tell me one thing I said directly to you that made you think I was ashamed of your hair. Silence. What? One thing. Something I said to you. You've made it obvious for years. Is no how. You didn't even come when I got my first real wig fitted. My stomach tightened. I didn't come because Mom told me you didn't want me there. What? She said you'd feel self-conscious. Chloe went quiet. Then, she told me you thought being there would make me uncomfortable. I sat down. Same day. 2 stories. Both of us carrying resentment from opposite ends. Chloe recovered first. That doesn't explain everything. I know. You told Mom I was impossible. No. You said I was unstable. No. She told me you did. That word again. Unstable. I gripped my phone. What exactly did she say? Chloe's voice hardened. That you thought I needed more help than the family could give because I was unstable. What I said was that you needed support from someone who understood alopecia better than I did. That's not what I heard. I know. Are you calling Mom a liar? I'm asking what you heard. Oh, please, Natalie. This is what you do. You make everything sound clinical so you can pretend you're not judging anyone. I let that sit, then said, whatever Mom told you. She didn't pick up the scissors. Silence. My own pulse sounded loud in my ear. That's all you care about. No. It's what you're responsible for. You promised. I didn't. Yes, you did. To who? Mom told me. She stopped. I waited. Then Chloe said, you're such a liar. She hung up. 10 minutes later, screenshots started arriving. 3 in a row. The first 2 were conversations between Chloe and Mom about wedding logistics. I read carefully. Then, the third screenshot loaded. Mom's message was dated 4 weeks before the wedding. Natalie told me she finally understands that fairness sometimes means giving something up. She knows you shouldn't have to be the only sister making sacrifices. I read it once. Then again. My fingertips went cold. I had never said those words. Not approximately. Not metaphorically. Not in another context. Never. Mom hadn't simply misunderstood a sentence. She had put an entire moral position in my mouth. A philosophy. A promise. And suddenly, the question that had followed me since the reception changed. It wasn't, what had Mom misunderstood? It was, how many times had my mother spoken in my name? The screenshot stayed open on my phone long after Chloe stopped texting. Natalie told me she finally understands that fairness sometimes means giving something up. There was no version of my life in which I had said that sentence. The next morning, I called Chloe again. She answered with a flat, what now? I'm not calling to fight. You keep saying that like you're conducting an interview. Maybe I was. The difference was that this time I wasn't interested in proving she was wrong. I wanted the source. You said I've treated you like you were unstable for years. What did I actually say? Chloe gave a tired laugh. You really want a list? One example. You told Mom I was impossible to help. I told Mom I didn't know how to help anymore. That's the same thing. No, it isn't. Silence. I continued. What else? You said you were tired of dealing with me. I said I couldn't be your only support. Her breathing changed. Then she said, you called me unstable. There it was again. Did I say that to you? No, Mom told me. Did she use that exact word? Another pause. Yes. I leaned back against the kitchen counter. Unstable. The neighbor who complained too loudly about a fence had been unstable. The cousin whose divorce embarrassed Mom had been unstable. A former coworker who challenged her in a board meeting had been unstable. Diane Brooks had always preferred words that made disagreement sound like pathology. Chloe kept talking. And you couldn't even come with me when I got my first real wig. That one landed differently. Mom told me you didn't want me there. What? She said having me there would make you self-conscious. Chloe went quiet. She told me you thought going would make me uncomfortable, she said. For more than a decade, I had remembered that afternoon as one of the times I failed my sister. Apparently, Chloe had remembered it as one of the times I abandoned her. Neither of us had made the decision. I rubbed a hand across my forehead. That doesn't excuse what you did at the wedding, I said. I know what you think. No, listen to the actual sentence. Mom may have told you things that weren't true. She still didn't put those scissors in your hand. Chloe hung up. This time, I didn't call back. That evening, I returned to the wedding emails, not to collect every ugly thing I could find, but to answer one narrow question. Where had inclusion become permission? The sequence was almost embarrassingly ordinary. I had emailed Mom that I wanted Chloe comfortable during the getting ready portion of the wedding. Mom replied that she would handle it. A week later, she told the bridal coordinator I had something special planned so Chloe would not feel singled out. Then came the message Chloe had shown me, the one where Mom said I understood that fairness meant giving something up. There was no email from me agreeing to cut my hair. No text suggesting it. No joke that could reasonably be mistaken for consent. Mom had built a bridge between two statements I had never connected, and Chloe had walked across it. I could have kept digging. Instead, I called Aunt Ruth. Evan had mentioned something a few days earlier, a phrase our grandmother used when Mom was young. Someone has to be the bigger person. Ruth became quiet when I asked about it. Your mother was always the dependable one, she told me. When her younger sister got sick, Diane took a semester off college. Your grandmother didn't really ask. She just assumed. Did Mom want to do it? Think she believed wanting didn't matter. That sentence followed me for the rest of the day. It explained something. It excused nothing. Mom had inherited a rule that capable daughters absorbed inconvenience so fragile daughters did not have to. She had also spent decades deciding who counted as capable and who counted as fragile. That night, I closed the notebook. Ben glanced over from the couch. Done? With this part. You found what you needed? I found enough. That surprised me as soon as I said it. 6 months earlier, enough would not have been enough. I would have wanted every email, every old conversation, every cousin willing to confirm another contradiction. But investigating my family forever would still have meant organizing my life around them. I know how the message changes, I said. I don't need 20 years of exhibits. Ben nodded. He didn't congratulate me or tell me what to do next. A few days later, we took the short weekend trip we had postponed after the wedding. Nothing dramatic. 2 nights by the lake, bad hotel coffee, a bookstore where Ben disappeared into the engineering section, and I bought a used photography collection. On Sunday morning, I walked alone with my camera for an hour. I photographed a woman feeding gulls from a paper bag, an old bicycle chained to a blue railing, and a little boy trying to photograph his own shadow. None of it mattered to anyone except me. That was exactly why it mattered. When we returned home, Mom asked to visit. She arrived carrying a white box. Inside was a new wedding album. The first page held a photograph of Ben and me at the altar. The next showed our first dance. Then cake, friends, flowers, the ceremony. Chloe appeared twice. Barely. Mom touched the edge of one page. This one can finally be about you. For a few seconds, I wanted it. That was the humiliating truth. I had spent most of my life wanting one day, when my mother looked at me without immediately checking whether Chloe was okay with the view. Mom saw my hesitation. We could put all of this behind us. What does that mean? Stop comparing messages with Chloe. Stop dragging up old conversations. I looked up. She gets worse every time you do this, Natalie. There it was. Raps in concern. Let me handle your sister, Mom continued. You two don't communicate well when emotions are high. I looked down at the album again. She was offering me exactly what I had wanted. Not equality. Victory. I could become the daughter being protected, as long as Chloe became the daughter being managed. I closed the album. I don't want to be chosen over my sister. Mom frowned. After what she did to you? I'm not defending what she did. Then, what are you doing? I wanted you to stop making us compete. Her face tightened. I have spent years trying to keep this family together. No. You've spent years standing between us. That is unbelievably unfair. Maybe. I pushed the album back toward her. But I'm not doing this anymore. That evening, I sent the same short message separately to Mom, Dad, Chloe, and Evan. If someone told me another relative had said something about me, I would ask that person directly. I would no longer respond to secondhand claims about motives, invitations, feelings, or decisions. I didn't demand they adopt the rule. I changed what I would participate in. Mom replied first. You are turning ordinary family communication into some kind of corporate policy. I didn't answer. Dad sent. Can we talk? I waited 3 days. When I eventually met him, I chose a coffee shop instead of my parents' house. He reached toward me when I arrived, then stopped. That mattered. I sat across from him. At the wedding, why did you grab me instead of Chloe? Dad looked down at his coffee. Your mother thought Chloe was having some kind of episode. I didn't ask what Mom thought. His eyes came up. What did you think? He took a long breath. I thought if I stopped you from fighting back, Chloe would calm down, and it would end faster. The answer was worse because it made sense. Not morally. Mechanically. I had always been the safer person to control. You saw someone holding scissors, I said, and decided I was the easier one to restrain. I wasn't trying to help her hurt you. I know. Relief appeared too quickly on his face. I stopped it. That doesn't mean I feel safe with you, the way I did before. His expression fell. Nat, I'm not ready for you to touch me without asking. And I don't want you showing up at my house unannounced. He nodded slowly. There was no instant forgiveness. That was not cruelty. It was accuracy. Over the following weeks, Mom changed tactics. Your father misses you, I asked Dad. He did. He had not asked Mom to tell me. Evan hates what this is doing to everyone. I asked Evan. I hate the tension, he said. I never said you caused it. Chloe wants her sister. I asked Chloe. She replied, I don't know what I want yet. Every verification shortened Mom's version of reality. Then Thanksgiving arrived. 10 days beforehand, she called. Chloe thinks it would be better if you didn't come. The old reaction rose automatically. The hollow feeling, the mental picture of everyone eating without me, the urge to ask what I had done now. Instead I said, okay, I'll ask Chloe. Mom went silent. Natalie, don't stir this up again. I'm asking the person whose name you used. I ended the call. Chloe answered on the second ring. Mom said you don't want me at Thanksgiving. Is that true? What? I repeated it. No, I said it might be awkward. There it was. One word. Awkward. By the time it reached me, awkward had become uninvited. She told you I wanted you not to come? Yes. Chloe exhaled sharply. Jesus. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then she said, she had been telling me things before the wedding too. I believe you. You don't sound like you do. I believe Mom told you things. I paused, but she didn't pick up the scissors. Silence. Nat. She didn't. Another long silence. Then Chloe said, very quietly, no. I waited. No what? Mom leaned to me. That isn't the part I'm asking you to own. Her breathing shook. Then she said it. I picked them up. I closed my eyes. I know. I did it. That was different. No illness as an excuse. No mother as an excuse. No jealousy dressed up as justice. I believe you regret it, I said. I do. I don't trust you yet. I know. For once, she didn't ask me to make that sentence softer. A few minutes later, our sibling group chat lit up. Chloe had written, for the record, I never asked Natalie not to come to Thanksgiving. Evan responded, then maybe we should all start speaking for ourselves. Mom replied, I was trying to prevent another scene. I typed, then ask us next time, and stopped. Thanksgiving was uncomfortable. Of course it was. But I went because I wanted to see Evan and a few relatives, not because anyone had restored my membership. At dinner, Mom eventually said, someone has to be the bigger person. I set down my fork. Being the bigger person doesn't mean speaking for everyone else. Nobody applauded. Uncle Greg kept carving turkey. Someone passed the mashed potatoes. And somehow that ordinary silence felt more powerful than a room full of shocked faces. 3 months later, a new sentence had entered our family vocabulary. I'll ask her. Mom would say, Natalie probably doesn't want to come. Evan would answer, I'll ask her. She would say Chloe was upset with me. I would say, she can tell me. Dad once began. Your mother thinks, then stopped. I wanted to ask if you're free Sunday. Trust with him returned in inches, not declarations. So did contact with Chloe. Our first coffee lasted 47 minutes. She didn't ask me to forgive her. I didn't offer. A month later, we had another. Meanwhile, my own life kept getting larger. I stayed in the leadership program. A younger communications specialist asked if I would mentor her. I said yes because she asked, not because anyone had decided competence made me responsible. My Sunday photography walks became regular. Ben and I began inviting friends over for dinner once a month. Eventually, we called it First Sunday Dinner. There was no head of the table. No designated peacemaker. Sometimes Evan came. Months later, Chloe came too. One evening, long after the wedding had stopped being the first thing I thought about when I woke up, our photographer sent a final archive link. Buried near the end was a candid image taken after Chloe cut my hair. One side was shorter than the other. My mascara had not been fully repaired. Ben stood beside me, and Priya was saying something that had apparently made me laugh. Nobody in the photograph was looking at my hair. Nobody was arranging us into a perfect family. I printed that one. No retouching. No cropping. It went on the wall beside the table where people now came because they wanted to be there. For most of my life, Mom had stood between us and told each of us what the others meant. These days, when I want to know whether someone loves me, is angry with me, or wants me at their table, I ask them. It sounds almost embarrassingly simple. I was 38 before I learned that a family shouldn't need a translator. The photograph stayed on the wall beside our dining table. For the first few weeks, I noticed it every time I walked past. The uneven hair. The mascara I hadn't completely fixed. Priya's hand blurred near the edge because she had been gesturing when the photographer pressed the shutter. It was nothing like the photographs Mom had always preferred. No matching posture, no careful arrangement of bodies, no invisible calculation about who should stand where so nobody felt overlooked. It was simply true. That became more important to me than pretty. The first Sunday after I hung it, Ben and I had 4 people over for dinner. Priya came with a bottle of wine. Evan brought bread from a bakery near his apartment. One of Ben's co-workers arrived late because her train stalled. Nobody apologized for not looking like a family. Nobody asked me to mediate anything. At one point, Evan noticed the photograph. You picked that one? I did. He studied it for a few seconds. You look happy. I was. He glanced at me. After everything? Not because of everything. That distinction mattered. For years, I had treated difficult things as if they contaminated every moment around them. If Chloe had a bad week, my good news became inappropriate. If Mom was upset, my peace felt selfish. If Dad was uncomfortable, I softened whatever truth had made him uncomfortable. The wedding photograph reminded me that a terrible thing could happen at 8 in the evening, and I could still laugh at 8:40. Pain did not own the entire day. Neither did Diane. A few days later, my phone rang while I was leaving work. Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered. Hi. Are you busy? I'm walking to my car. I won't keep you. That usually meant she intended to. She asked about work, then about Ben. Her voice was warm, almost casual. I waited. Eventually, she said, Your father thinks you've been avoiding Sunday dinners because he's there. There it was, the old route. I stopped beside my car. Did Dad say that? A pause. He worries. That isn't what I asked. Natalie, does every conversation have to be cross-examined now? No, I'm just going to ask him. Her voice cooled. You know, sometimes people tell me things because they don't feel comfortable saying them directly. That's their choice. And what am I supposed to do? Pretend I didn't hear them? You can listen. I unlocked the car. You just can't use what they supposedly feel to make decisions for me. That is not what I do. I didn't argue. I'll ask Dad. Then I ended the call. Martin answered that evening. No, he said when I repeated what Mom had told me. I said I wondered whether you were staying away because things still felt strange. That's different. I know. He hesitated. I probably should have called you myself. Yes. The word sat between us. 6 months earlier, I would have rescued him from it. I might have said, "It's okay, Dad." It wasn't. So I let him own the discomfort. After a moment, he said, "Would you want to have lunch sometime? Maybe next week." Okay. And Dad? Yeah? Please don't ask Mom to arrange it. He sighed. I won't. That was as close to progress as I needed that day. At work, the leadership program had moved into a project phase. My group was assigned a fictional hospital crisis and asked to build a response plan under a deadline. It should have been ordinary. Instead, I found myself enjoying it more than I expected. During one meeting, a younger communications specialist named Kayla kept apologizing before every suggestion. Sorry, but maybe we should confirm whether the statement came from the attending physician. Sorry, I just think there could be another interpretation. After the third apology, I looked at her. You don't have to apologize before asking for verification. She smiled awkwardly. Habit. I know the type. She laughed. Later, she caught me outside the conference room. Would you mind if I sent you something sometime? I'm trying to get better at crisis messaging. Sure. Really? Yes. The answer felt different from all the automatic yeses I had given growing up. She had asked. I had considered. I chose. That was all responsibility was supposed to be. A choice. Not a debt assigned to whoever looked most capable. The next message from Chloe arrived on a Thursday night. Coffee Saturday? No explanation. No message from Mom first. No request through Evan. I stared at it longer than the question deserved. Then I wrote, 1 hour, 10:30. She replied, okay. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our apartments. Chloe wore a dark green scarf wrapped loosely around her head. She had done more with her eyebrows than I remembered, giving her face a sharper expression. For the first 10 minutes, we discussed nothing important. Traffic, a restaurant Evan liked, the terrible chairs in the coffee shop. Then Chloe touched the cardboard sleeve around her cup. I started seeing someone. I looked at her. A therapist? She nodded. Mom doesn't like her. That almost made me laugh. Why? She keeps asking what I think before Mom tells her. There was humor in Chloe's mouth, but not quite in her eyes. I waited. She said something last week that made me angry. What? That I've gotten very good at knowing when I'm uncomfortable, but not very good at knowing what I want. I traced a drop of coffee down the side of my cup. That sounds difficult. You mean true? I mean difficult. She looked at me. There had been a time when I would have immediately helped her interpret the therapist's statement. I would have reassured, translated, softened. I didn't. Chloe continued. I keep thinking about the wedding. My shoulders tightened before I could stop them. She noticed. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Okay. I just wanted to tell you something without Mom explaining it first. I waited. I hated how you looked that day. The sentence struck hard enough that my fingers stopped moving. Chloe swallowed. Not because you looked bad, because you looked happy. She stared down into her coffee. You had your job, Ben. People there, who actually seemed happy for you. And I kept thinking you had become everything, while I was still the person everyone had to worry about. I said nothing. That doesn't make what I did your fault, she added quickly. I know that. Good. Because I would have ended the conversation otherwise. She rubbed her thumb over the cup sleeve. Mom had been saying you were doing something with your hair for me. She kept telling me you understood. By the time the wedding happened, I had turned it into proof that you finally knew what it felt like to lose something. I looked directly at her. And when you thought I backed out? I got angry. You brought scissors to my wedding. Her face tightened. Yes, that wasn't an impulse that began on the dance floor. No, the admission mattered. Not because it made the act better. Because it made her stop hiding inside the phrase, I lost control. Losing control suggested there had been no series of choices. There had been. Bringing the scissors. Walking toward me. Grabbing my hair. Continuing when I resisted. I need you to understand something, I said. I do. No, listen first. She nodded. I can understand how Mom manipulated you and still hold you responsible. Those are not competing ideas. I know. And if we keep seeing each other, I'm not going to spend every meeting reassuring you that I'm not angry, that your hair doesn't matter to me, or that you're still a good person. Chloe looked down. Okay, If that's what you need, I'm not the right person to provide it. She nodded again. It was one of the quietest conversations we had ever had. Also one of the most honest. When the hour was over, I stood. Chloe looked surprised. You're really keeping me to an hour? Yes. A small smile appeared. Fair enough. I nearly smiled back. Nearly. Trust was not a switch. It was repetition. A week later, Mom tested the new structure again. She called while I was making dinner. Chloe told me your coffee went wonderfully. I kept chopping an onion. Did she? She said you two are rebuilding. That sounds like something you should let Chloe and me define. Natalie, I'm happy. I know. Am I not allowed to be happy my daughters are speaking? You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. Mom went silent. Then she used the voice I knew best. Soft, concerned, reasonable. I just hope you don't punish her forever because you're angry with me. I put down the knife. There it was. Not accusation. Concern disguised as a conclusion. I'm not discussing my relationship with Chloe through you. I'm her mother, and I'm her sister. You're impossible lately. No. I washed my hands. I'm just not as useful in the old way. Silence. That sentence had escaped before I fully understood it. Mom recovered first. I have never used you. I leaned against the counter. Maybe once I would have listed examples. The birthdays. The appointment rides. The postponed job interview. The wedding statement. Instead, I said, I'm not arguing about the past tonight. How convenient. Maybe. You can't just create rules and expect everyone to adapt. I don't. I picked up a dish towel. I expect myself to follow them. That was the part she still seemed unable to fight. A demand could be refused. A boundary that controlled only my behavior, gave her nothing to negotiate, except access to me. Over the next 2 months, Sunday dinner at our place became regular enough that Ben bought a second set of inexpensive wine glasses because we kept running out. Priya came most often. Evan showed up when he could. Kayla came once after I discovered she lived only a few neighborhoods away and had nowhere to go that evening because her roommate was out of town. Nobody became a replacement family. I didn't need replacements. I needed relationships that existed because both people kept choosing them. One Sunday, Chloe came. She arrived, carrying a bakery box. I brought pie. Evan looked at it. Did Mom tell you we needed dessert? Chloe stared at him. Then both of them laughed. No, I asked Natalie. It was a tiny joke. It would have meant nothing to anyone outside that room. To me, it was almost astonishing. During dinner, Chloe disagreed with Evan about something political, and they argued for 5 minutes. No one looked at me. No one looked for Mom. No one asked me to interpret what either sibling really meant. They argued. Then Evan asked Chloe to pass the bread. The world did not end. That night, after everyone left, I stood beside the dining table with empty glasses and crumpled napkins scattered across it. Ben came in carrying 2 plates. You okay? Yeah. I looked toward the wedding photograph. I think I spent most of my life confusing peace with nobody saying the difficult thing. Ben set the plates in the sink. And now? Now I think peace might just be knowing a difficult thing won't cost you your place at the table. He nodded. Then, he started loading the dishwasher. No dramatic answer. No rescue. Just room for the thought to belong to me. Mom still called. She still slipped. Sometimes, she caught herself. Sometimes, she didn't. Martin kept his distance physically unless I initiated contact. Chloe kept going to therapy. Evan became almost irritatingly enthusiastic about asking people directly what they meant. None of us became a perfect family. That had stopped being the goal. One afternoon at work, Kayla showed me a draft statement and pointed to a sentence. Is this too cautious? I read it. Who are you protecting? She thought for a moment. The department. And who should you be protecting? The people affected. I handed it back. Then, write for them. As she returned to her desk, I realized the advice no longer felt confined to work. For years, I had written the internal statement of my own life for the wrong audience. Keep Chloe calm. Keep Mom reassured. Keep Dad comfortable. Keep relatives from talking. Keep everyone together. The cost had always been edited out. I no longer needed a perfect statement. I needed one I could stand behind. That evening, I came home, set my camera on the dining table, and looked at the imperfect wedding picture on the wall. My hair had grown several inches since then. I barely noticed. What mattered was that the woman in that photograph had stopped asking everyone else what version of her was easiest to live with. She had started asking a much simpler question: what do I actually want? And for once, I was willing to wait for my own answer. The next question turned out to be harder than any question about my mother. What did I actually want? For years, that answer had arrived pre-written. If Chloe was struggling, I wanted her to feel better. If Dad was uncomfortable, I wanted the tension gone. If Mom was worried about appearances, I wanted everyone to behave well enough that she could relax. Even my good decisions had often been shaped around preventing somebody else's bad reaction. Now, there was empty space where those instructions used to be. At first, I filled it with small things. On Saturday morning, I stayed in bed until 8 instead of driving across town because someone needed a ride. I bought a camera lens I had been considering for nearly a year. It wasn't extravagant. I had the money set aside. What surprised me was how long I stood at the register before paying, as though someone might appear and explain why the money belonged to a more urgent problem. No one did. On Sunday, I walked along the river before breakfast and photographed reflections in the glass buildings downtown. The following week, Kayla stopped beside my desk with 2 coffees. "I have a question," she said, "and I'm trying not to apologize before I ask it." "That's progress." She smiled. "Would you still be willing to mentor me?" I had offered informal help before, but this was different. Our leadership program allowed participants to build a small development plan around coaching someone junior. I looked at my calendar. Not at my guilt. My calendar. "I can give you an hour every other Thursday." Her face brightened. "That would be amazing. One condition." "What?" "If you need more than that, ask. Don't assume." She laughed. "Deal." It sounded simple. Maybe most healthy things did. 2 days later, Aunt Ruth called. We hadn't spoken since she told me about Mom leaving college for a semester to care for her younger sister. "Natalie, I hope I'm not getting in the middle." That sentence alone told me someone had already put her there. "You can tell me what you want to tell me." She hesitated. "Diane is worried." "I'm sure she is. She thinks you're shutting everyone out." "Do you think I'm shutting you out?" A pause. "No." "Do you think I'm shutting Evan out?" "I don't know." "Then why are we talking about what Mom thinks instead of what you think?" Ruth released a small breath. "That's fair." I waited. "She says you've decided you won't forgive her." "I haven't told her that." "She said you won't even discuss the past." "I told her I wasn't going to spend the next several years auditing every conversation we ever had." "That sounds different." "It is." Another pause. Then Ruth said, almost reluctantly, "I suppose I should have called you before assuming." "You just did." That was enough for me. I didn't give her screenshots. I didn't walk her through the wedding emails. I didn't tell her about the honeymoon test or the notebook. If Ruth wanted to understand me, I was available. If she wanted prosecution evidence against Diane, I wasn't running that office anymore. Mom called less than 20 minutes after Ruth hung up. "So now you're correcting me through my own sister?" I almost smiled. "No. Ruth just called me. I spoke to her because she called me. She said you made her feel like she was gossiping." I asked what she thought. "You always know how to make people feel foolish without raising your voice." There it was. A criticism wrapped around a compliment. Years ago, I would have defended my tone. "I'm not trying to make anyone feel foolish." "You may not intend to, but you do." "Okay." The single word irritated her more than denial would have. "Natalie, you cannot keep treating every relationship like a communications exercise." "I'm not. That notebook of yours says otherwise." I went still. I had never told her about the notebook. "Who told you I had a notebook?" Silence. Then Mom said, "Chloe mentioned it." That was possible. I had referenced it during one of our conversations, though I couldn't remember whether I had called it a notebook. "What exactly did Chloe say?" This is what I mean. You're doing it again." "Then I'll ask her." "For God's sake." Her voice sharpened. "You are teaching everyone to distrust me." "No, I'm teaching myself not to outsource trust." She went quiet. I hadn't planned the sentence. Sometimes the clearest ones arrived after you stopped rehearsing. I have spent my entire life helping you people communicate, she said. You've spent a lot of time doing that. Because nobody else will. That's changing. The silence on the other end felt different. Not injured this time. Threatened. I understood something then that had taken me months to see. Mom didn't only believe she was good at keeping us connected. She believed the connections might fail without her. Maybe she was afraid of that. Maybe she needed it. I didn't have to decide which. I have to go, I said. To your important life. The sarcasm was light enough that she could deny it if challenged. Yes. I hung up. My important life, as it turned out, involved grocery shopping and changing the sheets. I enjoyed both more than I expected. That Thursday, Chloe texted. Did you tell Aunt Ruth about Mom? I answered. She called me. Why? 3 dots appeared. Then vanished. Then returned. Mom said you're building a case against her. I stared at the sentence. There were at least 4 ways I could have responded. Defensive. Sarcastic. Angry. Clinical. Instead, I wrote, do you believe that? Her answer took almost a minute. I don't know. I replied. Then, ask me. Another pause. Are you building a case against her? No. What are you doing? Trying to stop people from telling me what other people mean. Chloe called immediately. I hate that you make this sound so simple. It is simple. No, it isn't. Her voice was strained. If I tell Mom to stop speaking for me, she acts like I'm rejecting her. I know. You make it look easy. I never said it was easy. That quieted her. I told her yesterday not to call you about something I said. What did you say? That I wasn't sure if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner again. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Okay. She kept asking why. What did you tell her? That I wanted to decide before everyone knew I was deciding. I understood that better than I wanted to. Did she accept that? Chloe gave a humorless laugh. No. What happened? She said you'd think I was avoiding you. And? I told her that would be between you and me. I closed my eyes for a second. Not because it was a grand gesture. Because it was the first time Chloe had described a boundary without asking me to reward her for it. Good, I said. That's all. What else do you want? I don't know. Maybe congratulations. For having your own conversation? She groaned. There she is. I smiled despite myself. Then, Chloe became serious. I'm trying. I can see that. That was as far as I was willing to go. Trying mattered. It was not the same thing as repaired. At the next first Sunday dinner, Chloe didn't come. She texted me herself an hour beforehand. I'm wiped out. I'm staying home. It isn't about you. I wrote back. Thanks for telling me directly. No guilt. No emergency. No call from Mom explaining what Chloe really meant. Priya arrived first. Evan came 20 minutes later and immediately opened the refrigerator as though he lived there. You have decent mustard now, he said. That's because you complained about the old one. I gave constructive feedback. You called it yellow sadness. It was accurate. Ben laughed from the stove. For nearly an hour, nobody mentioned our parents. Then Evan sat back with his glass and said, Dad called me directly yesterday. I looked at him. That's new. He almost said, Your mother wants to know, then stopped. What did he ask? If I wanted to watch a game with him. Did you? Yeah. Priya glanced between us but didn't interrupt. Evan rotated his glass slowly. He said something weird. What? He said he'd spent a lot of years letting Mom tell him what people needed because it was easier than being wrong himself. That sounded like Dad. Not because it was eloquent. Because it was uncomfortable. Did he say anything about the wedding? No. I nodded. Evan studied me. You disappointed? Yes. Going to call him. No. That answer surprised him. If Dad has something to say about that day, he knows where I am. The old Natalie would have prepared the conversation for him, created the opening, asked the gentle question, made confession easy. I had already done enough of that. After dinner, Ben and I loaded the dishwasher, while Priya and Evan argued over whether leftovers belonged in glass containers or whatever clean container was nearest. The room felt ordinary. I had started to understand how much I loved ordinary. No one was in crisis. No one was measuring affection. Nobody's discomfort required another person to disappear. At work, the following Monday, Kayla brought me a draft statement for a scenario involving an internal medication storage error. She had written 3 paragraphs explaining why the mistake happened before acknowledging what staff needed to know. I circled the opening. "Who are you asking the reader to feel sorry for?" She frowned. "The department, I guess." "Why?" "Because they weren't trying to cause a problem. Intent matters. But where?" She looked back at the page. "After impact." "Exactly." Kayla crossed out the first paragraph. Watching her rewrite it, I thought about how often Mom had reversed that order. "Chloe didn't mean to ruin your wedding. Dad was trying to stop a fight. I was trying to keep the family together. Intent first. Impact somewhere later, if there was room." I had spent years accepting that structure. I didn't anymore. That evening, Dad called. I answered from the parking garage. "Hi. Do you have a minute?" "Yes." He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about the wedding." I didn't help him. A long silence followed. "I should have grabbed Chloe," he said. The concrete walls around me threw his voice back faintly through the speaker. "Yes. I saw the scissors." "Yes. And I went for you because I thought you'd listen." I leaned against the side of my car. "I know. That wasn't fair." "No. I keep wanting to say I didn't know she would cut again." "You didn't." He sounded relieved for half a second. Then, I continued. "But you did know she was holding scissors." The relief disappeared. "Yes." Another silence. "I'm sorry." There was no dramatic release inside me. No sudden restoration. Just a sentence that should have existed months earlier. "Thank you for saying it." "Does that change anything?" "Not yet." He accepted that more quietly than I expected. "Okay." We spoke for another minute, then hung up. I stood there with my keys in my hand. For years, I had thought accountability would feel like winning. It didn't. It felt like putting a weight down and realizing your hand still remembered carrying it. The next morning, a message from Mom appeared before I left for work. I almost swiped it away. Then I read it. "I need to talk to you." The next line made me stop. "Not about Chloe. Not about your father. Not about what anyone else thinks. Just me." For several seconds, I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. "I don't know how to do that with you anymore." I did not answer immediately. That was another old habit I had broken. Other people's urgency no longer automatically became mine. I finished my coffee, packed my camera because I planned to walk after work, checked my schedule. Then, when I was ready, I typed back, "You can ask me directly. I'll decide whether I'm ready to answer." Mom did not answer for almost 6 hours. That was unusual enough to make me check my phone twice. Diane had always believed silence was useful only when she controlled it. If she sent a worried message, she expected a response. If she asked whether I was coming to dinner, hesitation became evidence that I was angry. If she said someone needed me, any delay could be turned into proof that I no longer cared. This time, I had given her the same thing I had been asking everyone else to give me. A direct question, a direct answer, and time. Just before dinner, another message appeared. "Can I come by tomorrow afternoon?" No mention of Chloe. No reference to Dad. No unnamed chorus of relatives. I checked my schedule before answering. 3 months earlier, I would have felt guilty for doing that. Now it seemed obvious. "I have an hour after 3, I wrote. She arrived at 3:11, carrying nothing. No album. No food. No envelope from somebody else. That alone made the visit feel different. Ben was home, but he stayed in his office after asking whether I wanted him nearby. "I'm okay," I told him. He nodded and closed the door. Mom sat across from me at the dining table. The candid wedding photograph hung behind her shoulder. She noticed it immediately. "You framed that one?" "Yes. There were prettier photographs." "I know." Her gaze stayed on it. "You didn't even fix your hair." "No. You could have." "I didn't want to." Something passed across her expression that I couldn't name without pretending I knew more than I did. "So I didn't." She folded her hands. "I don't know how to talk to you anymore." "You said that." "I mean it." "Then talk to me the way you'd talk to anyone else." "You're not anyone else. You're my daughter." "That shouldn't require a translator." Her mouth tightened. "I heard you the first dozen times." I waited. Mom looked toward the window. I spent my entire adult life being the one people called. That's true. If your aunt was angry with your grandmother, she called me. If your father was upset with one of you, he talked to me first. If Chloe was falling apart, she came to me. Her fingers pressed together. I thought that was what being useful looked like. The word caught my attention. Useful. Not loved. Not close. Useful. For a moment, I saw the 20-year-old woman Aunt Ruth had described, leaving college for a semester because everybody around her had decided competence created obligation. Compassion came easily. The dangerous part would have been turning compassion into permission. You were useful, I said. Mom looked at me. You still are. Then why does it sound like an accusation? Because somewhere along the way, helping people became deciding what they meant. Her shoulders stiffened. I never decided what anyone meant. You told Chloe I believed fairness meant giving something up. She was devastated. That doesn't answer me. I was trying to help her understand you. She could have asked me. She wouldn't have. Then she wouldn't have known. Mom stared at me. The sentence seemed to offend something fundamental in her. You would let your own sister misunderstand you? Yes. Her eyebrows lifted. If the alternative is putting words in my mouth. Natalie, that is incredibly rigid. Maybe. You could lose people that way. That landed closer to the truth than most of what she had said. Yes. Mom blinked. I continued before I could soften it. If someone would rather believe what another person says about me than ask me themselves, I may lose them. The room went quiet. That doesn't mean I want to. Her expression shifted slightly. But I'm done purchasing relationships with explanations. For the first time since she arrived, Mom looked tired rather than offended. What do you want from me? It was such a basic question that I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I had spent decades waiting for it. I want you to stop telling people what I think. She nodded slowly. And stop telling me what they think, unless they've specifically asked you to pass something along. What if they're afraid to say it? Then they can be afraid. That sounds cruel. It's uncomfortable. That isn't the same thing. She looked back at the wedding photograph. What about Chloe? What about her? You really think she can handle everything directly? That's not mine to decide. Mom's lips parted, then closed. I could almost see the old machinery looking for somewhere to go. The fragile daughter needed protection. The strong daughter needed responsibility. The father needed peace. The mother needed to coordinate all of it. Remove those assignments, and each person became inconveniently responsible for themselves. Mom stood after 43 minutes. At the door, she turned. I did love you, you know. The past tense made something ache. I know. No. She shook her head. I don't think you do. Maybe she was right. Maybe part of my work now was accepting that love and good treatment were not synonyms. I believe you loved me, I said. I also believe you used things I could do for you as proof that I should keep doing them. Her face changed. I didn't take the sentence back. She left without asking me to call anyone. That was the first sign that something had shifted. Not transformed. Shifted. A week later, it shifted back. Mom called while I was leaving one of my leadership sessions. Chloe is upset about Sunday. I stopped under the awning outside the hospital. Did she ask you to tell me? Silence. Natalie. Did she? No. Then I'll talk to her if she wants to talk. She thinks you're replacing us. I almost answered. Instead I asked, did she say those words? Another silence. You know what she means. There it was. The old mechanism, alive and healthy. But something had changed. It no longer worked automatically. I don't, I said. Then I ended the call. 5 minutes later, Chloe texted. Mom says she told you I'm mad about Sunday. I answered. She did. 3 dots appeared. Then, I'm not mad. I felt weird seeing you so comfortable with everybody. That was harder to read than anger. I replied. Do you want to talk about it? Yes. We spoke that evening. Chloe admitted that first Sunday dinner unsettled her. You have this whole thing now, she said. What thing? People who come because they like being there. The sentence sounded so sad that my old instincts immediately reached for reassurance. I stopped them. You can come when I invite you. I know. But I'm not building it around whether you're comfortable with everyone there. I know. She exhaled. I think that's the part I'm learning. What part? That everything doesn't have to adjust around me before I enter it. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she added, that sounded terrible. It sounded honest. She laughed quietly. Therapy is annoying. I've heard. Mom hates that I'm still going. That sounds like something between you and Mom. God, you really do say that now. Yes. This time we both laughed. The call ended without me promising anything. That mattered more than I expected. By spring, the leadership program had become part of my routine instead of an act of rebellion. Kayla and I met every other Thursday as promised. One afternoon, she arrived with a marked-up crisis draft and sat down without apologizing. You look pleased with yourself, I said. I didn't say sorry before asking for your time. I noticed. She slid the document over. A communications director had written a sentence, blaming confusion among staff for a scheduling problem. Kayla had crossed it out. What's wrong with it? I asked. It turns a process failure into a personality problem. I looked up. She grinned. You taught me that. I had. The realization stayed with me after she left. For years, that was exactly what had happened at home. A communication failure became Natalie was cold. A boundary became Natalie was selfish. Chloe's discomfort became Natalie was insensitive. Dad's avoidance became Natalie was difficult. The system protected itself by converting mechanisms into character flaws. Once I saw that, I stopped arguing with every adjective. I no longer needed to prove I was kind. I needed to know whether my actions matched the person I wanted to be. That was a much quieter standard. It was also harder to manipulate. Martin continued improving in small, awkward ways. He began asking before hugging me. The first time, standing in our entryway, he actually said, "Is this okay?" The question made my chest tighten. Yes. The hug lasted 2 seconds. That was enough. He never asked whether we were back to normal. I appreciated that. Normal had been the problem. Diane was less consistent. Some weeks, she spoke directly. Other weeks, she slipped back into old language. Everyone is wondering. Chloe feels. Your father thinks. Whenever that happened, I used the same response. I'll ask them. Sometimes she sighed. Sometimes she became irritated. Once she hung up on me. Nothing catastrophic followed. That was perhaps the most satisfying discovery of all. I could disappoint my mother and still go to work the next morning. I could let a relative misunderstand me and still buy groceries. I could say no to Chloe and still sleep. The consequences that had once seemed enormous were often just uncomfortable evenings. One Sunday, Evan arrived early and found me adjusting frames on the dining room wall. You're moving wedding pictures again? Only one. The candid photograph had been slightly crooked. He stood behind me while I straightened it. Mom still hates that one. I know. She said you picked the worst picture on purpose. I looked over my shoulder. Did she? Evan smiled, then caught himself. I mean, she said that to me. Better. He laughed. She also said you were making some kind of statement. I am. What statement? I stepped back from the wall. That I like the picture. He stared at me. That's it? That's it. He shook his head. You've gotten annoyingly difficult to gossip about. Good. The doorbell rang before he could answer. Chloe stood outside with a pie box. Her head was uncovered that evening. Fine patches of regrowth showed near one temple, but she didn't mention them. Neither did I. Am I early? By 6 minutes. She raised the box. Bribery. Put it in the kitchen. Dinner was noisy. Priya told a story about accidentally sending an office message to the wrong group chat. Ben argued with Evan about baseball. Chloe disagreed with Kayla about a movie. Nobody intervened. Nobody translated. Nobody announced that someone had become upset and therefore the room needed rearranging. At one point, Chloe looked across the table at me. You're doing the thing. What thing? Watching everyone. Occupational hazard. I smiled. Maybe. Are you checking whether we're behaving? The question was light, but there was something real underneath it. I looked around the table. No. What are you checking? I considered that, then realized I wasn't checking anything. I guess I'm just here. Chloe nodded. Good. Later, after everyone left, the house smelled like coffee and baked apples. Ben went upstairs. I stayed downstairs for a few minutes, putting glasses into the dishwasher. The photograph caught my eye. Months earlier, I had looked at that woman and seen what had been done to her. Now, I noticed something else. She was laughing. Not after everything was fixed. Not after everyone apologized. Not after the truth had been reconstructed. Right in the middle of an unfinished disaster. I had spent years thinking peace would arrive when everybody finally understood me correctly. It hadn't. Peace arrived when misunderstanding stopped controlling my choices. A message buzzed on the counter. Mom. For 1 second, old reflex took over. Then I read it. Are you free for lunch next week? No mention of anybody else. No emergency. No explanation for what I ought to feel. I checked my calendar. Wednesday works, I wrote. Her response came a minute later. Wednesday is good. That was all. Maybe it would last. Maybe it wouldn't. I no longer needed to know tonight. For most of my life, Mom had stood between us and told each of us what the others meant. These days, when I want to know whether someone loves me, is angry with me, or wants me at their table, I ask them. Sometimes I like the answer. Sometimes I don't. But at least the answer belongs to the person giving it. It sounds almost embarrassingly simple. I was 38 before I learned that a family shouldn't need a translator.